Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of What a Fuster Cluck. I'm your host, Lolita Keys. And as per usual, what has inspired this week's content is my own habit of podcast listening. I heard someone on a podcast recently say something that was just like, oh, it was such a gut punch and something that I know is so true. And let me just tell you, you know, I realize this is like a self-defense mechanism that I have, but I am much like a lot of you out there, I'm sure. I am my own biggest critic. It's like there's nothing you can say about me that I probably haven't already said about myself. And I'm very self-aware. And so, again, I feel like this is a self-defense mechanism. So I will easily admit when I feel like, I know what my flaws are and it's it's like something I kind of own so that if somebody else says it about me, it's way less painful because I'm like, oh yeah, duh, I already knew that about myself. And so I've said many times before, I met my husband when I was 29 and we started dating when I was 30. And by the time we got married and had kids, I think my first son was born when I was 34. My second son was born when I was 36. And I have said many times that I just felt like, the feminist movement really sold me a lie, basically. And there's more and more data, more and more information coming out, more and more books are being written about just the wild imbalance between the empowerment of women and how we've left our boys behind. And I don't want to regurgitate what I've said on other podcast episodes. So please feel free to go back and listen to some of my previous recordings on those topics so you can get a little sense of where I am there. And if this is your first time listening, you'll probably catch a little bit of that as I'm reading through this. But one thing I can say, I know that regret is poison, but I won't lie to myself by telling you that I don't regret not having gotten married sooner and younger. And that was mostly, again, because it was like a self-defense mechanism. I just felt very passionately that I needed to be a career woman and I needed to be able to take care of myself and I needed to be able to make really good money before I could ever even think about having kids or raising kids. And then it's just the whole ideology of bringing kids into this world and what does that mean? And oh, it's such a terrible world, even though we have indoor plumbing and clean drinking water and all of these amazing modern amenities, but the world is so terrible. And just all the things that I sort of told myself and convinced myself why I wanted to wait to have kids. And I went on to have two amazing children. I'm very lucky, very blessed. They're healthy, they're wild, they're crazy. But I definitely realize now that I would have loved to have had more children, at least one more. Although I jokingly tell people that I didn't have a third kid because I was too afraid it would be another boy. And there's a little bit of truth to that. But also, I would have had a third boy. Like, really, what's the big deal? I've always been so good with babies. And when I had babies of my own and even my nieces and nephews, I just really loved being a mother. I loved becoming a mother. And that was something that I sort of ran from when I was in my 20s and sort of shouting from the mountaintops that I never want to get married and I never want to have babies. I never want to have children. And I just want to travel the world and do all these things. So lo and behold, I'm listening to my podcast repertoire this week, and one came to the top of my feed that immediately piqued my interest. And I'm going to read you one of the mentions of one of the guests on this show, and then I'll get into what show it actually was that I was listening to. But what one of the people said, one of the guests on the show said was, later doesn't just mean you have fewer kids. It means you spend less of your quality years with your kids and with your grandkids. Ugh. See what I mean? Like that was the part that was such a gut punch to me because I know that that's true. If I'm being honest, if we're all being honest, it's true. It's just true. I know that people are living longer nowadays, but that doesn't mean that they're living a better quality of life. And the reality is, even with modern medicine and peptides and collagen and hormone replacement therapy and all these amazing things, that doesn't mean your body's still not going to age. No one has been able to beat death. And so regardless of what you think, you will get to a point in your life where you just can't keep up the way that you used to. And the older you get, the less patience that you have, the more rigid that you are, the more you tend to kind of lose your imagination, your ability to dream a little bit, like the world has hardened you. And this isn't everybody, but it's just an honest reality that I have thought about even for myself. And so, why is this all important? Okay, it's important because I it was an episode of Modern Wisdom. And the title of the episode, I actually have it queued up right here. So the title of the episode is The Birth Rate Debate. Why is no one having kids? And, I felt like I already knew the answers before I even listened to the episode. But regardless, I wanted to listen to the episode because it's really the statistics that I'm after. And so I just feel like as a society, as a modern society or a first world country, let's say, we're like caught in this absurd tension about, you know, society needing more babies because the birth rate replacement statistics are frightening globally. And I'm going to get into some of those in just a minute. But the culture, the economy, and like this ideology that we've built, it just makes it feel like having children is just impossible, irresponsible, or just completely not worth it. And I just sit there and ask myself, like, how did we get here? And I know how we got here. Again, it's decades of the feminist movement. It's decades of female independence. And much of that was amazing because, we do deserve the right to vote and to buy property and all the good things that come with being a free citizen in this country and elsewhere. But we completely just kind of dishonored the value of motherhood. And the reality is, this is so innate to most women, not all women, but most women. Statistically, 90% of women actually do want to have babies. But a lot of times we don't because we just feel like the odds are against us. We can't find a suitable mate, or it's just too expensive, and all these crazy reasons. And here we are. We have hit a rude awakening period where our birth rate replacement is frightening, and it's literally scary for a multitude of reasons, but just in the sense that there is a reality, people, that it's the younger generations that ultimately end up having to take care of the older generations. And I laugh, like I say this jokingly, but I'm also not joking. I have had an on the books job since I was 14 years old. I have been paying into Social Security since I was 14 years old. And to think that that money, quite literally might not be available to me when it is a source of income I'm depending on along with my own personal savings. But like, who even cares about the stock market if there's nobody out there to contribute to it? So this is totally twofold. This isn't just about people not being able to contribute to Social Security, but it's also all of the avenues of investment. Like, what about your pension fund and all these things? If there's not people there to contribute to that, all of it is going to go bye-bye. And this is a problem, and one that I think needs more global awareness, and why it's so critical that we start to raise back up. You don't have to be a conservative in America today to appreciate the value of marriage, the nuclear family, and having children and raising babies. So let me just read some of these statistics that I found completely eye-opening and wildly alarming that were rattled off on this episode. Now, if you want to listen to the episode, it is almost 4 hours, so I'm trying to do you the favor of giving you sort of the doom and gloom, but then also the positives and also the what can we do about it angle, so that you don't walk away from this episode feeling like we're all going to, die poor, hungry, and starving with no money. Kidding, not kidding. So again, some of the statistics that I think are really sobering. So globally, 71% of the world's population now lives in countries where birth rates have fallen below the replacement level. The replacement level is statistically 2.1 births per woman, in case you're wondering. In the US, we have hit an all-time low fertility rate of 1.6 in 2024. That's 710,000 fewer babies born last year than at the peak in 2007, which is a 23% drop since 2007. So less, well, that's like 20 years ago now, which is really kind of crazy when you think about it. But within 20 years, we've seen a 23% drop in people having kids. In the UK, being childless at age 30 is now completely the norm. It went from 48% to 58% of women. So listen to that, 48% to 58% of women are childless at age 30. And the older you get, the less likely you are statistically to even have children. And so that's crazy. That is now you're well over the 50% of the society not having kids and normalizing this in the UK. So the math should honestly terrify you at current birth rates. It's all right, how can I say this and make it make sense? Listen to this statistic. At current rates, births in the industrialized world are halving, like I'm trying to pronounce this so that you understand the word, are halving every 50 to 60 years. So not disappearing slowly, literally being cut in half. This is not a slow decline, people. This is literally us falling off a cliff, okay? This is serious. The gut punch statistic is that approximately 40% of girls alive today will never become mothers. This is both heartbreaking and alarming. And again, this isn't me like trying to doom scroll you with data. It's just me pointing out the trajectory of the civilization and how I just feel so passionately that we really need to re-glorify our whole purpose for existence, which is like procreating. And again, like this, my mother had 4 children and she was such a spectacular mom. But for me, it was just the tumultuousness of my parents' marriage too that really just put a bad taste in my mouth about ever wanting to have kids. And it's such a shame because, you know, the older that we get, I feel like when we're younger, especially when you do grow up in a more urban environment or closer to a city where people are just more liberal and more progressive, you're more likely to want to postpone having kids and like living your life or whatever. But I can tell you, I've lived on both sides of that coin. You know, my 20s by comparison were phenomenal, fantastic. I traveled, I partied, I made amazing friends, I had awesome experiences. So it's a tough realization because I don't want to sit here and say that I have regrets. But if I'm being honest and I compare that to my 30s when I actually had my kids and got married, there's just no comparison. I mean, the amount of sheer joy that I get from my kids, and yes, this is not me utopiaizing, that's not even a word, being a mom, because it's also so freaking hard. It is the most challenging and most rewarding thing I have ever done. But the dopamine rush, the pure joy endorphins I get from my kids is unlike any experience I ever had in my 20s. And you just don't know that until you have experienced it. And, you know, we're so malleable when we're young. We're so impressionable when we're young that, again, it's about the messaging. You know, my mom was like so unhappy that it wasn't as if she was a great mom. You know, I've said before, I always felt really loved by my mother. But, you know, she didn't glorify her situation or make me feel like this is something I want to do, like this is something I want to chase. And we could always have the argument about how getting married too young, you're more likely to get divorced because you're so young. Do you even know who you are yet? Do you even know yourself yet? And I think this is why it's important to be grounded in your family from a young age and have consistent messaging. And that doesn't mean that some kids aren't just going to innately feel wild and free. They are. But again, I think it's putting the emphasis on this is like the survival of civilization, you guys. And I think there's nothing wrong with putting value, stock, and excitement into having a family and raising your children and being in a strong marriage and cultivating what that looks like for the younger generation. And I hear this expression recently, and I think it's called a trad something, um, which basically is the shortened version of traditional. So like being a traditional mom and getting married younger, having kids younger. And I still want to emphasize that you shouldn't just go out there and marry the first Tom, Dick, and Harpo that you kind of come across. And ladies, I know that our standards have gone way up as our value in society has gone way up from a monetary perspective, right? We're graduating college 2 to 1 with men. And we kind of feel like, okay, I'm not just going to live my life with some hobo while I'm out here busting my ass and getting an education and all this stuff. So I realize it's hard. And this is why I stress that we need to empower our men and put more stock back in our men and really just balance our view of both men and women in society and how we complement one another and like raise up these boys to be strong, confident, independent young men who aren't going to be afraid to get, be faced with rejection sometime, but have some passion in their life, be able to be a provider, whatever the case is. It's just so critical because we've got to raise up the stock in some of these dudes to be able to like satisfy what women really want, which is at the end of the day, it's a protector and it's a provider. It doesn't matter if your wife is ultimately going to end up working or whether she wants to work or not. It's just like, is she going to be attracted to you? And are you going to be attracted to her in perpetuity when one of you is like completely outworking the other? And it's a reality that we need to deal with. So we're never going to be able to solve for this crisis if we don't start rebalancing our attitude towards men and women, family values, having babies, raising babies, not living at home in your mama's basement, playing video games and whatever, and just like not being attractive to most women out there or somebody that's going to be able to be a provider. And a lot of times for men, they just need that reason. I hear all the time that people who have unexpected children, yes, 50-50 shot, either you're going to end up miserable or you're going to be totally fine. But there's something also about having a baby too that really just, for most people, like you're just going to get your shit together because you realize now you're living for more than just yourself, but you have to be empowered to want to do better, work harder, be a provider for the child that you're bringing into the world. And so I've kind of already covered a little bit like how did we get here, but from a historical perspective, I just want to put a little bit more of an emphasis on exactly how we got here. And as I said, I blame a lot of it on the feminist movement, which doesn't mean that the feminist movement didn't have some positives. I think people think I'm like this wildly anti-feminist person, and I'm not. I'm not saying we should take all women's rights away and put them back in the kitchen. I'm just saying that we have so crapped on the thought of a woman not working and making her feel almost like a loser for wanting to stay home and raise her babies, which is the most rewarding, most amazing, most glorious thing that a woman can do to contribute to society if she is in fact having kids. If she's not, okay, fine, focus on your career. But if we're having babies and we actually want to stay home and raise those babies, there's nothing more in society, more glorifying, more something that we should be lifting up more than that. And when you think back to whatever year, I'm not even going to give a year, right? But why did people go from having like 8 or double digit kids to having 1 or 2? Well, first of all, there was no reliable form of birth control, so family size wasn't always a choice. There was religious frameworks for a lot of people that kind of said one way or the other if you were just going to dole out a bunch of kids. And also, realistically, there was high child mortality rates, a lot of disease, a lot of illness. Not every child made it to adulthood. It wasn't unusual for you to lose a baby, lose a toddler, lose a young child back in the day because of who knows what, contamination, again, sickness, whatever. And then a lot of people just had a boatload of kids out of economic necessity, which seems contradictory. But if you're somebody who's running a farm or running a business, you're having multiple kids so that they could be there to shoulder some of that labor for you eventually, or help you run that business, or even help you tend to the younger children that you have in the house. And then there was also just the community and the extended family structures that meant you weren't just raising kids alone. And that's something that I know that we deal with a lot today is a lot of us are raising kids alone. And this is not meant to be a solo operation. They say it takes a village for a reason, and it's so important to parents to have a village. And many of us are just raising our kids solo, mom and dad, which, yes, you brought the kid into the world. You should be able to support and take care of that kid. But it does take a village. You know, you want your kids to have more influence in their life than just their mom and dad. It really is that village of people that you want them to be around, their aunts, their uncles, their grandparents, your friends, the appropriate teachers and mentors. All of these things help to shape a child and keep family traditions going and passing down stories. I mean, all of that is just like so beautiful. And so again, what changed? Okay, birth control gave women more control over when they were having kids and how many kids they were having. Industrialization removed the economic incentive for large families, and we were all going to work in the factories and like working these long hours and whatever. And as I've said, the feminist movement, and lastly, my favorite, social media and influencer culture started actually selling us this competing vision of the good life, travel and brunch and freedom and drinking, till your heart's content and not being tied down to anything and having this totally like free living and whatever. And it is glorified online. Let's face it. I mean, look at some of the most popular influencers out there. How many of them are promoting family, are promoting having kids and whatever. The amount of influencers out there toting fancy cars, traveling, whatever, nice jobs, nice clothes, whatever. A huge majority of them are not married, and if they are married, they don't have kids. And this is what our children are seeing, right? And so having kids becomes an obstacle to that lifestyle. And so we removed all the forced reasons to have children and we replaced them with nothing. No new shared meaning, no new cultural story about why family still matters in a world of abundance and in this country where we have many freedoms. And so for me, I feel like it's a mindset shift that needs to happen. A lot of people might have felt like they didn't want to have kids because the world is going to hell. And that's the big villain that we all want to put our time and energy into. And so there's like a massive driver of the birth rate collapse being about people subscribing to that ideology of why should I have kids? It's such a crazy world out there. And I mean, the other reality is the economic reality. It really is a lot of people just feeling like they have to live in these dual income households. You need two incomes to survive. You can't have kids until you have like $100,000 in the bank, and it costs $250,000 to raise one child. And so you got to have all of that saved up or whatever before you can even have a kid. And it's just, I'm not saying that it's a bad idea to have some money saved up before you have kids, because struggling and financial insecurity does introduce its own stressors. But this is our problem as a society. We are a gluttonous consumerism society. If many of us just sat back and were really willing to make the sacrifice, and if our society glorified that instead of the constant overspending, which that won't happen, unfortunately. But I think about how many more people, myself included, who maybe didn't need to work full time, but because we want to have all the things and keep up with the Joneses and, go to Marshall's and Target and wherever else we go, where there's constant marketing in our faces and you want to have this and you want to have that. And look over here, there's a sale and blah, 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 blah. It's just, it's a reality check. It's that being honest and being truthful with yourself. How much more value do these things really bring to your life? Because it's all fleeting and you can't take any of it with you. And what matters the most is your legacy and what you're leaving behind in the world. What was your imprint on the world? And oftentimes that's passed down through your children. Most of us aren't going to get books written about us. And so who's going to talk about us when we're gone? It's going to be our kids. We're going to live on through our kids, through our grandkids. And so delaying having children or not having children at all is just It's not the answer. And we cannot continue to function in this world if we're not replacing our population. So, what is like the ripple effect of all of this? What actually happens when nobody has babies? Well, number one, it becomes a literal Ponzi scheme problem. I mentioned at the top of the show Social Security. If there's not money coming into Social Security, but there's a crap ton of money going out, where does that leave us? And then there's what we call the Detroit preview. So, one of the guests on the Modern Wisdom show spent 7 years in Detroit, a city built for 2 million people with 700,000 people left in it. Fancy houses decaying next to families having picnics. I mean, think of how sad that is. And that's just part of some of the industrial revolution, coming to a close. It's part of some of the car manufacturing industry. I mean, I'm not a Detroit historian, but it is a real shame when you think about how flourishing that city used to be, one of the wealthiest cities in the country. And now, yeah, it is. It's like a graveyard of decay. Um, let's see, what else? What else did I want to highlight? Okay, small towns disappearing. So, again, if we cannot sustain birth rate replacement, what typically happens? People gravitate towards the cities because that's where the jobs are going to be more at mass. And so smaller towns disappear. They don't shrink, they literally disappear. When there aren't enough taxpayers, municipalities literally have no choice but to disband. You can see entire towns in some of this country will end up completely abandoned. And that's not an overstatement. That's not an exaggeration. That could literally happen if you don't have people there to be able to pay the teachers, pay the firemen, pay the police officers. Like what do you have? And then there's the geopolitical wild card. So countries with declining populations, they're starting to realize that there's a closing window to be able to project military power. First of all, we have a problem in this country whereby, again, another, I don't know the statistic off the top of my head, but another alarming statistic of our young men and women can't even get into the army because of some health condition, some pre-existing, but some just brought on by our horrible diet and, the things that we're eating and the lifestyles that we're living. And so how are you supposed to remain a superpower, which is important? Since the dawn of time, people have been conquering lands. So, how do you expect to remain a strong country or a superpower when you don't have enough people to join your military? And right now in this country, you can volunteer to join the military. You're not forced to go. And if we don't do something about this birth rate, who knows if that's even still going to be an option or if that's something that is going to change here, whereby it's going to be mandatory service, which I'm not even saying I'm super against that. And I'm saying that as somebody with two sons. I really feel like a lot of that, might mentally sharpen and prepare you and strengthen you and give you resilience and grit and tenacity in a world where we've got it so easy that we might need a little bit more of that. And again, I say that as a mother with two boys, and maybe if there's a lot of chaos going on in the world right now. Let's face it, there's a lot of wars and everything else going on in the world. And I would worry that they would be deployed and they would lose their lives. But the realist in me understands that in some countries where mandatory service is required, it does instill a level of patriotism that I feel like we're losing in this country, and might not be a bad idea to think of some way to rectify that. So let's get to the solutioning part, because again, I know a lot of this so far has been depressing and like doomy gloomy, and I don't mean to be like that, but I do think that this topic needs a huge reality check. And I think it's important that as parents of young children or anybody out there that's listening to this, that you remember how crucial it is to glorify and lift up having a family and having kids for the sake of everybody's future and well-being, and just for society to continue on the way that it sort of always has. I mean, this is truly remarkable what's happening. It's like we are extincting ourselves, which is really creepy when you think about it. But anyway, okay. So solutioning, that's important. I don't think that money alone is going to be able to fix this. And again, in the Modern Wisdom episode, they go into a lot of this in more detail. So I'm just going to rattle off some of the things that they've pointed out that I think are worth noting here for anybody who feels like, what are we going to do? And it's too late to do anything. All right, baby bonuses and cash payments, which is what some people have proposed. So think of that like universal basic income, or where anybody who has a baby gets like a bonus from the government or gets some kind of a cash payment. These have weak effects unless sustained at enormous scale. And again, who pays into it? So countries like Hungary have tried this for years with several contested results. Next is what actually moves the needle. So, okay, if you want to have more babies, basically, natural abilities tell us that the earlier you start, the more success that you will have. So, the earlier you are married, the earlier you start to form your family, the more you start compressing education timelines so women are not forced to choose between a degree and their biological window, the more opportunity we will actually have for people to have kids. And one of the things I love about YouTube and AI and all these crazy things that are out there is that it does provide us alternative ways to educate ourselves. I'm sorry, but college is basically bullshit at this point. It's a lot of freaking fluff. It's a lot of ridiculous redundancy. It's unbelievable to me how many kids are graduating from high school now with the ability to have already obtained college credits, only to go on and still have to do like another 4 to 6 years of college because they're going to get their money from you one way or the other, right? And I just feel like it's just a lot of garbage. It's a lot of trash. It's one of the reasons why I am such a huge proponent for vocational schools, where it's a targeted learning environment and not this ridiculous college credit system. Like, it's all based on the number of classes you've taken, which are awarded a certain point system, and then that equals you can go ahead and say that you have a 4-year degree or a master's degree or whatever. And what do you come out of there really knowing and understanding? What is some of your early core college classes actually teach you and do to prepare you for the ones that are really going to hone in and give you that focus for more targeted learning? But I just feel like you should be able to bypass a lot of college and go straight for the thing that you want. And you can do that through vocational school, or you can even prepare yourself to sit down for some state exams or whatever it is that you have to do to get whatever certification it is that you want. And so I do love the idea as a solution for this compressed educational timeline. Like, can we just really sit back and look at our education system today and reevaluate how much value there really is in what we call kindergarten through senior year of high school? I mean, if you're never going to do anything that has any relativity to science, how far do you really need to go in that realm? I mean, we just need to like modernize, and so much information is available at our very fingertips that it's like, what are we doing? If we can give kids the ability to hone in more on their natural innate skills and help them to drive in a direction to look for that career that's really going to feed their passions, their innate skills, their God-given talents. Why aren't we doing that? We're so slow in the education system to catch up to where we are today. It's really kind of archaic the way our public school system is still functioning. And I can only hope and pray that in the very near term that starts to shift. And maybe AI will take us there faster. I don't know. Next up, policy ideas worth considering that they mentioned on the show. So tax structures that stop penalizing large families, free or deferred education for mothers. Oh, that would be amazing. That way, if you do want to have your babies younger, but you feel like you're passionate about something and you do want to go to college or you do want to go to a vocational school or whatever, as a mom, you have the ability to do that at little to no cost. And I know then there's the reality of trying to figure out, well, how do we pay the teachers? But again, we could do a lot online nowadays to make up for that. And parental leave that doesn't derail careers. So this is another thing that, depending on where you are in the world, like some moms get 6 months, some moms get 12 months. And here in America, I think we still only get like 6 weeks or something like that. I think FMLA is 12 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, but there's no guarantee that you're going to get paid for that. And it's ridiculous to think about the fact that you are expected to go back to work full time. after your baby is 6 weeks old. It's just totally mind blowing to me. And have to be away from your baby. I know you could make the argument again that back in the day, if you were running a farm or running a small business as a family or a local store or whatever, and you needed to get back to doing that, at least your child is like still with you. And again, you probably have, a relative that's helping out or a community that's somehow helping out. And lastly, the real fix, again, I hope I have driven this point home. It really is cultural. It's not even legislative. You cannot subsidize your way out of this crisis. The government can't be responsible for bailing us out of this or paying for all of this. At the end of the day, like we really do need to recover. We need to recover the value of family and having children. And I think that there is the ability to find that happy medium. And if we don't do that, I just think that it's setting us up in the long run for a really difficult future when so many of us work right now and we just dream of retirement because we're just we're doing the job because it's the thing that pays the bills, but we don't absolutely love it. We're not super passionate about what we're doing, but we're going to work hard and we're going to produce and we're going to get that paycheck. And we're just dreaming of that day that we can retire. But the question is, retire with what? I'm about to just start putting money back under the mattress. I don't even know what's a safe investment anymore in the long term. I need to have a financial advisor on here one of these days and just get some of this insight and info into what are their thoughts on the future of the market with the birth rate replacement being where it is. So that's a topic for another day. All right, let's close this one out. I hope I gave some ideas, and it really just boils down to the messaging. I think is the most important thing. I think it's the messaging. I think if we start to live in a society where we are having more babies or at least surpassing getting back to a healthier birth rate replacement as a globe, I do think that as humans, we will figure it out. I really believe we have always been able to figure it out, regardless of what has stood in front of humanity. We have always ultimately come up with some kind of a solution. Luckily, knock on wood, it hasn't been the end. As people, we just have this drive to survive, or at least most of us do, thank God. And so I think if we just shift the emphasis to the true value that comes from raising a family and having kids, I think people will just naturally start to gravitate back towards that more instead of us demonizing motherhood and fatherhood and the nuclear family and acting like it's this ball and chain that's just going to ruin your life forever. You guys, it's so cliche, but your kids grow up in the blink of an eye. When you're living in it, you feel like you're never going to be free again. You feel like you're never going to get to that point where you can focus only on yourself. But I swear to you, my life has never gone faster since I have had kids. And you realize that when you wake up one day and your kids are like middle-aged children and you're like, oh my God, like you were in my arms, this little baby, only yesterday, it feels like. So I would really encourage you, if you're someone out there who's thinking about having kids, or maybe you've just had a baby and you're just feeling like, oh my God, am I ever going to get myself back? Yes, you will get yourself back. Yes, you will have free time again. Your kids will grow up. They will need you less and less if you've done a good job raising them. They will need you less and less. Hopefully, they will go out into the world and become productive human beings, and you will have to navigate your way back through life again and, reignite your passions. Time, in that sense, will be on your side when you think of the small window of time that women can even have babies. In comparison to the rest of your life, it really is such a small window. So I want to give a shout out to all of the mothers out there who did go on to have 3 children, 4 children, even 5 children. You all are keeping us together. You're like sustaining us. I'm so appreciative of you, and I'm also wildly envious of you. I wish more women my age who came from sort of my same circumstance, upbringing, or background would talk about this more openly, and just how rewarding motherhood is and how beneficial it is to your life, and also how it's okay to have that regret that we didn't start younger. And it's important that we say that out loud now so that younger women can hear it and feel more empowered to listen to that thing inside of them that is just part of our human biology, that's kind of like calling you to motherhood. And so, remember that quote that I took from the show at the very beginning? Later doesn't just mean fewer kids, it means less time with your kids and with your grandkids. And that just really speaks to me. So this is not me telling you what to do with your life. It's calling out the Fuster Cluck of our declining birth rate and what that means for us as a culture, as a world. And what I really want you to take away from this is to question the narrative. So the glorious life of no responsibility, guys, that is a sales pitch. That is a sales pitch, and a damn good one, and most people fall for it. But meaning is not found in the absence of burden. It's found in the right kinds of burdens that you choose freely. And so some people might say, oh, are you saying having kids is a burden? I mean, guys, yeah, in a way it is, but it's not a bad burden. It's like a great burden. It's a wonderful burden to have, and it's the most rewarding one at that. So go back, listen to some of my other episodes. This is like the Fuster Cluck of the highest order. There's nothing more important than having babies and raising babies, in my opinion. And of course, having a balanced society at that, which is why the messaging is so important. So get out there, get your groove on, have some babies. We got to get this birth rate replacement up. We got to start honoring motherhood again, because it truly does deserve to be on a pedestal. So that will do it for this week's episode of What a Fuster Cluck. I am your host, Lolita Keys. Please remember, like, share, and subscribe to the show. We are on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube at the moment. And it is so important for the algorithm for you to hit that subscribe button, to share the show if it really resonated with you. It means the world to me. Continue to email me with your comments and your suggestions. whatafusterclucklk@gmail.com. And as always, thank you for listening.